So I talked about just if you are looking at the provisioning a Kubernetes cluster. So on top of that, Tanzu comes with pre-installed packages and also packages that you can select to install. They're not installed, but they're there and ready for you to install with just a few commands. So let's back up a little. So Kubernetes, the way I see, is sort of like an operating system, right? Or an operating system that sits on top of an operating system. What do we call that? Kubernetes? But I'm saying.
Thank you everyone for joining us on the CloudNativeFM podcast. And today I'm really excited because finally we have a guest from VMware. So it's been a very long time. You've never seen a guest before from VMware side. This is episode number 35. And I have quite reaching the year of the CloudNativeFM, and I've been not able to succeed with the guest from the VMware. But today I'm really happy that someone from VMware joined, and I think you are, if you are on the Twitter side, you are already familiar with that face, Carlisia Thompson, and he's a wonderful Knative maintainer and also the senior member of technical at VMware. So she's been always doing the wonderful stuff in the VMware side. So let's introduce Carlisia to our Cloud Native FM viewers and introduce yourself to my audience.
Hi, so I'm glad to be here and hoping I will be the first of many VMware folks to come here on your show. And yeah, like you said, I'm a senior member of technical staff at VMware. I've been there since 2018. I came via the Hep2 acquisition. So I was working at Hep2 before that. And back then at Hep2, I was working with I was a maintainer for Project Valero, with this backup and recovery of Kubernetes clusters. So when we were acquired by VMware, I continued on the project, and currently I am working as a maintainer on the Knative project, open source, and it's Knative is a tool for Kubernetes to it's a serverless and eventing. Those are the main functions for the tool, but basically is to make development of apps or containerized apps more streamlined on Kubernetes. And before all of that, I worked at Fastly. Fastly is a CDN, and I was helping build a brand new generation of their TLS system.
Yes, absolutely. I think a lot of the great stuff you did for the very long time with the different roles in the different teams. That's a really wonderful story for me. So before I jumping into the technological stuff, so where you currently live and how the COVID affects you and what are your activities while being in the home, isolated and not being in the tech conferences for a very long time?
Yes, so I live in San Diego right now. I've been here since 2012. And I lived in Boston for over 20 years before coming to San Diego. And before all of that, I came from Brazil. My accent, if people are wondering. And this past year and a half, 2 years, has been really busy with a lot of changes for me on my personal life. So, yes. COVID did affect it affected me a lot. Like, I think it affected everybody. So I'm sort of, and I just recently moved places. So I feel like I've been catching up for a long time. But yeah, that's where I am. But all good, I have pretty healthy and I have a lot of support, and VMware has been great in terms of supporting everyone during this extra challenging period.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
and thank you for asking.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So I've been seeing the Twitter, a lot of the folks from the Latin America, like Brazil, they are being the part of the VMware team. Like I think three or four people that I know, and one of these people I talked to is from Argentina, Mauricio Salatino, is also the VMware member in Knative project as well. So I think a lot of the Latin people in the VMware, that's a good news to hear about.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. We have Ricardo Katz and other folks on the Tanzu team.
Yes,
It's cool.
absolutely.
It's great.
So, so I think there are a lot of VMware things are happening over the year. I think the recently VMware World is been in, I think schedule and it's ended. It's been new products, new news is from around the VMware. So one of the news that's really target audience for everyone. That's a VMware Tanzu Community Edition. So I haven't dive deep into that VMware Tanzu, but I news how what it brings to the table for the cloud native tech companies and cloud native tech people. So let's draw some points, draw some your audience who are absolutely unfamiliar with VMware Tanzu up to this point. So tell us about what is VMware Tanzu and what is VMware Tanzu Community Edition gives to the people.
That's a great question. It is a very prominent project in the VMware Tanzu family of products and projects. And I think it's, so the way I see it, Tanzu Community Edition is going to be is going to serve a different purpose for different people. For example, for me, and I don't want to, like, as a disclaimer, I'm not going to compare it to other existing tools because I have not been keeping up with what's out there. So I'm speaking strictly about the Tanzu Community Edition, and it is something I use. For me, for example, if I'm going to provision a cluster, when I'm going to provision a cluster, that's what I'm going to use because it's fast, it's easy. I can do it via just making some selection on a UI, or I can do it via command line. And when I want to decommission that, I can also just use that tool. I don't have to go to the provider's website and terminate all the instances. So, and uses the cluster API to achieve that functionality. And so that's one use that you can have for it, independently of what you're doing. So the project uses existing tools. It is not trying to reinvent the wheel, but it's packaging what is out there in a way that it just makes it simpler and more streamlined for the user. Another use for it is if people are interested in purchasing the commercial version of Tanzu, you can use, and you want to see, and if they want to see what it is like, what it feels like, how it performs, Tanzu Community Edition is the tool that you would use to get that preview for free, right? So before you decide to upgrade, you can use it just to play with Kubernetes, and we use Kubernetes, upstream Kubernetes, so we don't add anything special to Kubernetes. We build on top of the upstream Kubernetes, so it's going to be compatible. Whatever you put in there in your cluster, you can transfer it to a cluster that is that has been provisioned with something other than Tanzu Community Edition. And if it's a Kubernetes cluster, it will work just fine. And so you can use it to provision a cluster very easily. And you can also provision a cluster locally on your local laptop and play with Kubernetes, right? And just, for example, if you are planning to take one of the CNCF exams, you can use that to provision things quickly and practice. Or if you just want to run a Kubernetes cluster that fits within the requirements for Tanzu Community Edition, you can do that. You know, it is solid enough for that. So if you just want to try out Kubernetes, like, okay, I'm going to run a couple apps on Kubernetes in production, and you can use that for that.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I think the one thing you have to draw here, that's a really a wonderful analogy to draw, that they're already using the familiar tooling that the people built over the year of 7 years at Kubernetes community. Like somebody builds a Kubernetes cluster like K3s clusters or other cloud native bundles app or Docker containers. There are so much available today in the market when I want to use Kubernetes as I'd like to want it to use. But I need a platform where I need to run it. So that platform is VMware Tanzu, and it on top of it, you have so much tooling. You can choose the tooling whatever you like it to be, and then you deploy apps on top of it. So the infrastructure is available, apps and tooling are available. You just want to play around with these apps and these tooling as well. And now the community edition give you the free version of that. You can do it. The commercial support always give you the 24-hour support. You can dial a number and ask for support, but the community edition for those people who don't want to purchase the pro version or the enterprise version. So the community version is wonderful for the people. So when I first heard about this news, that's really an incredible news for me because I want to test things up before I want to purchase things up. So community version is a great addition to that. So tell my audience about what's comprising in the community edition and what are the specific goals or use cases to use the community edition for the VMware Tanzu.
Yes. So I talked about just if you are looking at the provisioning a Kubernetes cluster. So on top of that, Tanzu comes with pre-installed packages and also packages that you can select to install. They're not installed, but they're there and ready for you to install with just a few commands. So let's back up a little. So Kubernetes, the way I see, is sort of like an operating system, right? Or an operating system that sits on top of an operating system. What do we call that? Kubernetes? But I'm saying it's sort of like an operating system because you install Kubernetes, but you're not done. You have to, for it to be useful, you're going to have to install other tooling on top of that. And what is that going to be? For example, I worked with Valero, right? So that's the first ones to come to mind for me. You should be backing up your cluster. What tool are you going to use? Valero is a very popular tool. It's very solid. It's been around for a long time. That's when people talk backup recovery of clusters, Valero is usually in the conversation. So if you want to back up your cluster, you have to install something. Hopefully it's going to be something solid like Valero. If you want, you're going to need certificates. So what are you going to do? Like, you have to install something. You're going to need monitoring, right? So you're going to need Prometheus, so you're going to have to install that. So when you provision a cluster, a Kubernetes cluster with the Tanzu Community Edition, a lot of that is already, so as you provision that, they automatically get deployed. And on their website, there is a list of what, there are two separate things. One is a set of core packages that get installed automatically. And another thing is a list of other packages that don't get installed automatically. For example, Valero is one of them. It doesn't get installed automatically, but it's there in a way that is sort of like prepackaged. Maybe we can think of it that way. Because if you want to install it, you give it a few commands and then it's there. And then you can ask, well, but I could go to the Valero website and download it from there. It's like, what value is it adding? Now, for people who do work with Kubernetes, installing a software on Kubernetes, I mean, can be made easier, let's put it that way. For example, one way to do it is, well, there are two ways that I know you can do it. Three ways. So one is with kube control, right? You kube control -f, and you apply the YAML, a YAML that has the configuration that you want to set as what you want the state of things to be. So the states for that package that you install. Another way is that the software can have a CLI. So they can have a Go program or a Python or anything, so they can build it themselves and have the CLI do the installation. So you pass some parameters to the CLI, some flags, and then it gets installed. Another way is to use a package management app like Helm, right? Or like the Carvel tooling to do the installation. So when you install via the Tanzu Community Edition, when you install one of those packages that are available through that edition, you will be using the Carvel tooling. So the Carvel tooling is what's used behind the scenes, but the interface that you use is via the Tanzu CLI. So it's going to be common for all packages. The flags are pretty much the same. And so it's sort of like a package management, or at least it's an interface to a package management, which is the Carvel tooling. And in my opinion, it can be easier because with Carvel tooling, you can, like as a package author, for example, I authored the Valero package. As a package author, there in the Carvel tooling, there are things you can program in there. So the interface for installing an app can be a lot simplified. And I think it's much easier, for example, to install Valero with the Tanzu Community Edition CLI than with the Valero CLI.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I think one of the points that you draw is really important because in the Kubernetes landscape, I like to see the Kubernetes as a cloud, like the Azure, the AWS, the GCP. We have a lot of the services running in there, and a lot of the timing, the services can give you the virtual machine, then the operating system. Then on top of operating system, you can install the apps you want to install on top of these operating system and virtual machines. But in the Kubernetes landscape, as you draw points on, there's a different methods to installing the Kubernetes, and also there are different methods to how you can back up the Kubernetes cluster, because that's really we like it to be, because you want to set your Kubernetes cluster in an HA environment, like something broke up, how you can back to the normal position that before the cluster broke up. So the Valero is a tool for you have it there. Then you deploy application on top of it using the Helm chart, the customized tool. Then you have a Prometheus and Grafana to observability and the monitoring. And also there are cloud native storage solution is also available. So you like to see the Kubernetes is the same way that you treat the cloud, like they have a cloud, have an infrastructure layer, then we have a monitoring layer, then we have a storage layer. So these are the different layers available. But to this point, nobody, the ones tool can give us this flexibility to do almost 90% of the stuff using the same one platform. We have platform like Rancher Kubernetes engine, like Mirantis build out some platform. So you can build up the Kubernetes cluster, and you can then installing the app is your responsibility. And also they don't give you the backup solution and a lot of these kind of stuff. So I think we need some kind of tooling at this moment of time to manage this Kubernetes complexity and plus as cloud native apps, because we all know we can build container images like 5 different ways. Like you can get Docker, Builder, Kaneko, Podman. We have a container runtime interfaces. We have tons of observability solutions available. So I think the Tanzu is give you the all the feature good enrich Kubernetes. We can say is Tanzu is an enriched Kubernetes where you can do a lot of the stuff with ease of management and these kind of stuff as well. So that's all the great news for me that you discuss up to this point. So another question on top of this, if somebody is using the Tanzu Community Edition or the Pro version, what are the responsibility of the dev people and the operation peoples? What are the things that in the Tanzu dev or the people are using, and what are the things in the Tanzu are the operation people using, and what you suggest some of the best practices if we build out a team and they want to use Community Edition, what are the best way to use the Community Edition for the teams or the organizations?
So Tanzu as a suite of products has a lot of tooling, and I am not familiar with all of the toolings, and I'm not qualified to speak to if you want to go in that direction, or if you are going in that direction, like what to look for to use if you are an operator versus if you are a developer. For the Tanzu Community Edition itself, there is I guess I'm going to say it depends, because, for example, it depends on how you organize, the teams are organized, like who is using it, right? What it's like I talked about some of the purposes for this version, for this edition, and you could be a developer and do back-to-back. Use it to provision the clusters, or even like even if it's just locally. And I think, yes, I don't do like field work, and I feel a little bit not confident to speak about like what the best practices should be. But what I will say is, let's say, it shouldn't be different with the community, Tanzu Community Edition from, if you're just running Kubernetes or any other flavor of Kubernetes. There is nothing about the Tanzu Community Edition that's going to be different, that's going to require you to do things in a different way. So, talking about best practices for Kubernetes is a whole other topic. But whatever that is because Tanzu Community Edition is Kubernetes, is an upstream Kubernetes, but comes packaged with these toolings and a nice user interface that makes it easier for people to use. So the focus on usability is very strong there. So that was my answer and non-answer.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. There is so much in the Kubernetes one person can know all about, because there is complexity associated with building the apps, and deploying the app is another field, and then but then an app is deployed on the infrastructure and monitor the apps how it's catering the traffic on the live production cluster is another field, and then give a storage, that's another networking. So we have talked about the Kubernetes a lot in this Cloud Native FM. We have people from the supply chain security, we have people from the Google, like Kelsey Hightower. We have Azure folks coming up. So there's really difficult to answer these kind of best practices when it comes to
Yes,
Kubernetes.
it is because, and it's interesting because on one hand, a lot of times Kubernetes can sound super complex, and then we can make it sound super easy too, right? Like I'm sitting here, say, oh, you want to deploy, you want to provision a cluster, just press 3 buttons and voila. And then it's like, oh my gosh, Kubernetes is that easy, but it isn't. Between provisioning a cluster and using it and implementing best practices, that is, like security by itself is a whole universe of like best practices within that. And then networking, how you're going to configure, that's a whole set of expertise. And just one thing that comes to mind for me as I'm thinking about this, if there's an organization, it's not just one single person using, or even if it's a single person using actually the Tanzu Community Edition, because I'm working with Knative now, and I see up close how much of a difference it makes for development. So I just recommend people look into, so there is a Knative package in the Tanzu Community Edition. And so, look into installing that and using Knative, because for people who are deploying containerized apps to Kubernetes, or I could say apps to Kubernetes, because any app deployed to Kubernetes will have to be containerized. Knative just makes it so much easier. If you're not using anything, you have to use Knative. It's going to give you like functionalities like it's called revisions. So it's like versioning. It versions your app deployment, and then with that comes rollback. So you want to roll back to a previous, whatever revision, like let's say you have 5, want to roll back to the previous one, number 4, or number 1, you can do that. It has auto scaling, which is very cool. So just, look into the packages and make sure that you are fully utilizing what's there. Some packages are very familiar, like Prometheus. Forgetting what else is there. That's my recommendation.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And you are also the maintainer and the active member of the Knative project. And I'm very lucky that I speak to the Knative people, for like one of the earliest, like one of the co-founders from the Knative project, Matt Murray, previously on the podcast. And he tell me that's Knative, how it's came, how it's evolved over the year, and it's gone through many names. Like he's telling me on the podcast that Knative is first called App Engine Flex, and then we use another name called flexernetes. Somebody people came and elaborate for us. So the Knative have so much naming coming up in the people mind, but I like the name flexernetes. Why people call it Knative? So use flexernetes as well. So I think Knative is a wonderful project. It's kind of a Lego drop. Like I think when the Tecton project is coming up, so people Tecton builds coming up, so they can use the Tecton build, but it's they can convert it out and make it a separate repository, and what we call the Tecton build as a Knative project. And the Knative is people previously call is for the serverless, but I think there is so much after the serverless coming up in the Knative, like Knative eventing, revisioning, Knative serving, and then we have like eventing, somebody have a queue in the messaging queue, and then it detects the queue is coming up and detect those changing and do some kind of stuff. So I think Knative is a wonderful project because it's layering up, but it's shrink down as well. However you like it to use, you can use it, but it's a rich and wonderful. I think so many companies are investing in the Knative project, like VMware, like from Microsoft, IBM. So many companies are contributing to the Knative project at this moment of time, and I'm really heavily studying this project on my free time, Knative project. So you are the active maintainer, and you've been spent a lot of time in the Knative project. So tell us about the updates coming up in the, I think finally the Knative reached 1.0.
Yes, yes. So if you allow me, I want to back up a little bit before talking about the updates. Knative is, for people who know Knative, and for people who know what serverless means, you know, fast forward. But I think a lot of people who could benefit from Knative, they don't, because when they go and read through the materials, or when they hear about it, they can't connect the way we describe Knative, the way we, the experts, describe Knative, doesn't map at all with, for example, like I have always been a developer. So the developer Carlisia 10 years ago, I wouldn't understand. Like I wouldn't say, oh, this is not, I wouldn't say it is for me, because none of the words don't map to my vocabulary. So I think we could do a better job there. So Knative has mainly 2 parts right now. It used to have 3 parts. So let's back up to, like you were talking about Tectron, and to give people context. So Knative used to they have the serving part, the eventing part, and the build part. And the build part was moved out of the Knative project to be its own project, which was then renamed Tectron. So when you were talking about Tectron and build, that in Knative, that's how these pieces relate. So what remains in Knative is mainly the eventing and the serving. There might be, there might be other areas, like that might be streaming, that will become part of it, right? It's like we can, we'll definitely be growing the project probably, we'll see what areas get added. So in the serving area is where the scaling and the revision and all of that is built. And then there's the eventing, like you were saying, queuing messages and piping things through depending on what happens. So just wanted to give a little context for people who don't really know. And the serverless part is that just to the benefit of people who listen to your show and are not familiar with this. The serverless part is simply saying, well, you don't need to do a lot of server-related work that we have done for you. So you interface with this tool, and then things get taken care of, which in the outside Kubernetes world is the standards. As a developer, what do you want to do? Deploy, roll back. Those are the if a developer is working with like a platform as a service or Heroku, those are the things, those are the buttons you're going to be clicking, or the commands you're going to be passing via the CLI. And Kubernetes doesn't provide that, but it provides that via the Knative project. So for people who think, oh, I don't need serverless, well, if you're using Kubernetes and deploy an application, you do. That's the thing that you need at any rate. So for what's new, so Kubernetes has been pretty, Kubernetes, sorry, Knative, has been pretty stable for a while. And people decided, yeah, it's about time that it becomes 1.0, and that happened this month. Yeah, we're still November. Yes. So there's a blog post. There are a lot of people who wrote about it. I can't tell you that I joined the project recently. I can't tell you that I have in my head all the big changes. So I'm not gonna attempt to list them.
Yes, absolutely. Because there's really difficult. Human memory is a very short one as compared to the Knative features that pop up in the 1.0 release. Finally, I think it's a wonderful, I think, appreciation from the cloud native ecosystem and the cloud native community when they see the Knative lands the 1.0 release. And I love the people who have left the VMware and the Knative project team. They also shouted out that finally we have gave out a 1.0 release because a very older project as compared to the Kubernetes. I think Kubernetes is a 7 and Knative is being quite doing a lot of the wonderful work in the ecosystem because I want to see the Knative is a one tool that I can use to deploy my apps, then scale my app, then implementing eventing in my apps. So I need to say Knative is a one-stop shop for me in the future if I want to deploy my apps on top of it, because today we have 1,000 different solutions so we can deploy apps on top of it, but we have to learn those solutions as well. But if we learn one solution to deploy all the things, I think that's a really wonderful news for everyone who listening to this podcast. I think we have covered a lot on Knative on this show, and I will try to catch up with more folks from the VMware side on the Knative team. So tonight is a refresher. So before I let you go, Carlisia, we are just wrapping up our year. Like we are in the closer to December, and tell us about your year in review, plus what your plans are in 2022, and what you're most excited about in this year achievement, and plus what are you looking after to with the VMware, the Knative, the Tanzu in the 2022.
Yes, so real quick, I will give you a couple links for people who are interested on what got included for this 1.0 release of Knative. And yeah, the people who, some people left the Knative project, but they are still involved. They will always be like godparents of the project, the way I sense that they are still so vested because it's a tool that has a lot of value, and people don't detach from something like that easily. So, and then we keep plodding along. And for my end of year review for myself is there was a lot of introspection and trying to see what do I want to be when I grow up. Kind of question this year for me, and at the end of before the end of the year, I landed on the Knative project, which was not. It was a result of a lot of this introspective work, and I feel very much is where I want to be, building this tool that is for the benefits of application development and making developers' lives easier. And the team, both the VMware Knative team and the other maintainers, is just such a good project in terms of people. So I'm really happy with that, and the follow on to that for what's my goal or plan for next year is just become just contribute a lot of value to the project and grow myself as a contributor, and that's it.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I think that's a wonderful project to get involved, and all the links are available on the chat if you're watching this session from the YouTube. And try to be get involved into this project as well, because I will try to get involved early in the next year on try to contribute some of the stuff that is happening on the ecosystem, because a wonderful tool, a wonderful. I think if you see the demos on the internet on Knative, you see the power and flexibility of tool, how you wanted to use it, and you can use in a very most of the wonderful use case scenarios that you are really struggling at this moment of time, and this tool can help you with that. So I think everybody listening to us or watching this conversation, go join the discussion, the Zoom call that happening on the Knative project, and that's a wonderful people also involved. Some of the good people left the Knative project, but some of the very good people from the community also joined the Knative projects, and that's a really, because people who are in this project making this project a wonderful place for everyone to get involved into this. So wonderful conversation with you, Carlisia. I've learned a lot during the conversation how the VMware Tanzu works, what the community edition, what Knative does as well. So before I let you go, I think I have only two women in tech join me in the Cloud Native FM. One is from the microservices tools called Ortelius. He's a CEO, the co-founder of that tool. And also the previously in this month, I've joined by Kati Gamanji from the CNCF ecosystem advocate. And I asked this question to that that during the conversation she replied, we want to see more women in the open source contribution, like open source tooling. We have a very short number. The CNCF release out some report, and it's a very, very small number. And we are really, we need to do some kind of stuff so we can gauge this number as well. So what's your thought on what your experience in the tech, what your experience in the VMware's tech, and what your suggestion for the females or who are watching our session, who are listening to our podcast? What's your suggestion on how to get involved in an effective manner, and how to build a successful career, woman career in the tech? What's your tips on this?
Man, how much time do we have? In a lot of ways, it's not different than it would be for anyone. And I tell anyone, you need a lot of patience to work with tech, because it takes a long time. It takes a lot of focus and concentration to just make a little bit of progress. Computers are finicky. You have to really enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, it's going to be hard, just like with anything, and for anyone. As for women in particular, my recommendation is again. So having a network is important to anybody, but the more challenges you have, for whatever reason, maybe it's because you live in a place that's not a tech hub, or maybe because you're a woman, maybe because you are an immigrant, the more extra obstacles you have, the more important having a network is. And also, so look to invest in things that give you a lot of return for your investment in terms of money, time. I think contributing to open source these days is for anyone, right? But it's like you really have to know your situation. It's like how much extra investment you need to make. Contributing to open source takes time, and if you're not being paid for it, it's work still, but it really makes you very visible. So it's if of all the things that you can invest time on, this is something I would recommend. Maybe invest in career coaching, is so you can get an idea of what you should even be thinking about. Networking and network. Do one-on-ones with people, and if you hate one-on-ones, the more you hate it, the more you should do it. So you stop hating it, it just becomes normal.
Yes.
Normalize having one-on-one with people, from your work, from outside your work. Just like ask people, hey, can I have a one-on-one with you? Can I make a recurrence? Can I make it like once a month? Can I make it once a week? Don't overwhelm yourself, but you learn a lot.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I think all the great tips, and one great tips I think is in networking. That's really important in IT, because a lot of the timing you don't know what's happening elsewhere, and you just know by watching what other people are tweeting in the social media, what people are posting in the social media. If I think that in 2022, like we are approaching the 2022, that's a really a wonderful story, because you can connect with anyone in virtually, like from you all around the world. You can virtually anyone, like the people experts in the cloud native ecosystem. So I think the networking that the Carlisia said is absolutely 100% agreed. That's a really vital for everyone to be successful in that community as well. So thank you,
And
Carl.
there's one more thing. Sorry, there's one more thing that I think is super important at the top of my list, is be of help. Find opportunities to volunteer, because that will give you learning and will give you the networking, and you'll give you, like, you're gonna be hopping on calls and having one-on-ones with people. All that is going to come naturally if you start volunteering for something. Volunteer for a meetup if there isn't one. Start one. That I have done that, and it has been amazing in terms of meeting new people, strengthening ties with a whole set of communities, being in the right place at the right time. So,
Yes,
all right, that's it.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much. That's a wonderful, because that's my story is absolutely similar to this, because I have started the Cloud Native Islamabad, and it's been a 1 year old, 1.5 year. During this Cloud Native Islamabad period, I have met with 50 different people from the different 50 different countries and 50 different companies. So that's give me the feelings of how to can connect with each one to one, how to make a conversation out of it, and how to be a enjoyable time when you're spending with another folks. So that's another wonderful tip for you. So try to build out some meetup around in your local area and start sharing your knowledge, because while you share your knowledge, we test your knowledge, you audit your knowledge while you are learning good things, while the learn what are you learning is a worth of next 10 years, or it just random tooling might be obsolete within 2 or 3 years. So I think the key takeaways from this conversation is try to do a networking and try to build meetups so you can talk with people confidently. But Carlisia, thank you very much for joining me today in the Cloud Native FM. I will catch you again in the next year on another great things happening in the Knative project and the VMware Tanzu. So thank you very much for joining me today. Hope you enjoyed the time with me, and I will catch you again the next year. Thank you everyone who showed up for this podcast. Hope to see you again with the next episode of another guest. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye bye everyone.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye.